and Damon improvises this joke about Carl Lewis being gay, because the whole premise of Men on Film is they out people. So he does this joke about Carl Lewis, and the censor is on the button, and he can, we had a 30-second delay, so he could have hit that button, but for some reason he didn't, and it aired. Carl Lewis was livid and wanted to sue. Fox started to strip the show before we got into syndication, and from my point of view, that was going to kill syndication, which is why you do the show in the first place.
This single moment got the Wayans family canceled from Hollywood forever. The censor could have stopped it, but didn't.
It was, very disheartening to think that, you put all of this energy and hard work and doing something that you think, not only creatively is going to be great, but that the upside is going to be there, and then to have that taken, I couldn't bring myself to continue.
Behind the scenes, Fox was already destroying their syndication deals and stripping away their generational wealth.
No, I remember when we left In Living Color because Fox was syndicating the show and it was hurting Keenan's pockets, and Keenan was like, nah, you ain't gonna do this to me, and my family said, F this money, and we all left In Living Color. There's an episode of Living Color.
This is how Hollywood systematically canceled the most powerful black family in entertainment history. The Carl Lewis controversy gave Fox the perfect cover story. But their war against the Wayans family had started months earlier in corporate boardrooms where executives were panicking about a dangerous precedent. In Living Color wasn't just successful, it was proving that black creators could build generational wealth without Hollywood's permission. That had to be stopped.
Fox started to strip the show before we got into syndication. And from my point of view, that was going to kill syndication, which is why you do the show in the first place from a business standpoint.
Fox's decision to strip In Living Color wasn't standard business practice. It was a calculated attack disguised as innovation. For decades, television shows ran for 5 years before entering syndication, where creators made their real money. Syndication was where The Andy Griffith Show made Don Knotts rich, where I Love Lucy kept paying Lucille Ball's family for generations. It was the golden parachute that turned successful shows into generational wealth. But Fox rewrote the rules specifically for the Wayans. They flooded the market with In Living Color reruns immediately, ensuring that when the show eventually reached traditional syndication, it would be worth pennies on the dollar. The network was essentially stealing the Wayans' retirement fund while they were still working.
And when halftime came, the entire audience for the Super Bowl turned their channel to In Living Color. And it was this little show that took on this giant and crushed. And the next year, they hired Michael Jackson to do their Super Bowl, and every year since, they've had a humongous star at Super Bowl halftime because of In Living Color.
The Super Bowl victory had made the Wayans too dangerous. They had proven that a black-created show could steal America's most valuable television audience from the NFL. Every entertainment executive in the country understood the implications. If the Wayans could do this to the Super Bowl, what other untouchable events might they disrupt? Meanwhile, Fox was simultaneously using In Living Color to launch other shows without paying the Wayans a dime. The show that had built Fox's credibility as a legitimate network was being strip-mined to support newer projects. They were taking the Wayans' creation and using it to fund their competitors.
Forced us to not fight as one. We fought as 10. And that was the thing. If If one of us had a fight, 9 of us were there.
But Fox had miscalculated. The Wayans weren't just another entertainment family where individual members could be bought off or turned against each other. They had been forged in the housing projects of New York, where survival meant absolute unity. When you attacked one Wayans, you were fighting all of them. The contrast with how Fox treated The Simpsons was impossible to ignore. Matt Groening's show, which debuted the same year as In Living Color, was protected like a precious jewel. Groening retained ownership, creative control, and maximum syndication value. The Simpsons would eventually generate over $13 billion in revenue, making Groening one of the wealthiest creators in television history. The difference wasn't about business metrics or audience size. In Living Color had higher ratings than The Simpsons in its early years, and far more cultural impact. The difference was about race and power. Fox was establishing a precedent that would follow black creators for decades. No matter how successful you become, you will never be allowed to build the kind of generational wealth that white creators take for granted. Kenan saw exactly what was happening. His phrase, "My rainbow is gone," wasn't just about money. It was about the systematic destruction of his family's future. They had created something revolutionary, something that proved black excellence could dominate mainstream culture, and the industry's response was to change the rules to ensure it never happened again. When Kenan walked away from In Living Color, Fox executives assumed they could simply replace him and continue profiting from the Wayans brand. They had no understanding of what they were really dealing with. A family that had been battle-tested in the projects of New York, where betraying your blood meant death.
I remember when we left In Living Color because Fox was syndicating the show and it was hurting Keenan's pockets, and Keenan was like, nah, you ain't gonna do this to me. And my family said, fuck this money. And we all left In Living Color. There's an episode of Living Color where
the decision to leave wasn't about noble principles or artistic integrity. It was about survival. The Wayans understood that if they let Fox break Kenan, they would all be next. Every sibling would be isolated, exploited, and discarded once their usefulness expired. The only way to maintain their power was to maintain their unity, even if it meant financial ruin. Damon Wayans had already left after season 3 to pursue his film career, but he was still connected to the family operation. Kim Wayans was building her own acting resume, but remained loyal to the cause. Sean and Marlon were the youngest, just starting their careers, but they understood what was at stake.
Because we protesting and we going, you ain't gonna my brother. We a family. You touch one, you touch all.
The December 20th, 1992 Christmas episode became their declaration of war. As Jamie Foxx sang This Christmas, the entire Wayans family stood in the background wearing black sunglasses like funeral attendees. They weren't participating in Fox's holiday celebration because there was nothing to celebrate. Their brother was being robbed, and they were witnesses to the crime. The visual was subtle but unmistakable to anyone who understood the context. Millions of viewers watched the Wayans family refuse to smile, refuse to engage, refuse to pretend everything was normal. It was civil disobedience broadcast to America's living rooms.
And that's why season 5, it got weird. It got Bismarcky, and God bless Chris Rock. He came at the wrong time, but and as brilliant as he is, you couldn't save it because the eyes of the show is gone.
Fox tried to save face by bringing in established stars like Chris Rock and Bismarcky for season 5, but it was too late. In Living Color without the Wayans was like The Tonight Show without Johnny Carson or Saturday Night Live without Lorne Michaels. The soul of the show had been surgically removed. The ratings collapsed. Critics noted the dramatic drop in quality. Most importantly, the cultural conversation moved away from In Living Color entirely. The show that had dominated pop culture for 3 years became irrelevant overnight. Fox had won the battle but lost the war. They kept the show but destroyed its value. Meanwhile, the Wayans family paid the immediate price for their rebellion. Marlon was broke, with $700 in the bank, and $900 rent. Kim and Sean, who were contractually obligated to finish season 4, described it as psychological torture. They were forced to perform in the corpse of their family's creation while knowing they would never see a dime of syndication money. But the Wayans had learned something crucial about Hollywood. The industry needed them more than they needed the industry. In Living Color proved that Black creators could generate massive profits without compromising their vision. Now, they just needed to figure out how to do it without studio interference. The family dispersed to different projects, but remained connected. Damon developed My Wife and Kids. Sean and Marlon created The Wayans Bros. Keenan moved into film directing. They were building a parallel entertainment empire, one that Fox couldn't control. Hollywood took notice. The Wayans had demonstrated something unprecedented, a Black family choosing unity over money, walking away from guaranteed success rather than accepting exploitation. That kind of independence was dangerous to an industry built on keeping talent desperate and dependent. What happened next would show just how far the system would go to ensure no other Black creators ever achieved the same level of autonomy. By 2000, the Wayans family had rebuilt their careers independently, proving they didn't need Fox or traditional Hollywood to succeed. But just as they were achieving financial independence, they would discover that the industry had developed new ways to steal from Black creators. Methods so sophisticated that the theft wouldn't be exposed for decades.
I read that Scary Movie that you guys got a really, really crappy deal out of that.
I think in Hollywood you always get crappy deals.
But that's not your 7th or 8th deal, maybe your first one.
I think the first one we got a crappy deal, definitely. But the second one, this first one was so big, we opened at $42 million.
Yes.
Scary Movie wasn't just another comedy film. It was the Wayans family's declaration of independence from the studio system. Keenan directed, Marlon and Sean starred and co-wrote, and they maintained creative control throughout production. The movie proved that they could generate massive profits without compromising their vision. The first film's success was staggering. Made for $19 million, Scary Movie grossed $278 million worldwide, outperforming even Scream, the movie it was parodying. The Wayans had created a new subgenre and owned the franchise that defined it. For the first time since In Living Color, they were in control of their destiny. Harvey and Bob Weinstein at Miramax had distributed the film, and initially, the relationship seemed mutually beneficial. The Weinsteins got a massive hit, and the Wayans got creative freedom plus reasonable compensation. For Scary Movie 2, the deal improved significantly, reflecting the family's increased leverage. But success made the Wayans dangerous again. By 2003, they were demanding compensation that reflected their actual value to the franchise. The Weinsteins' response was swift and brutal. If the Wayans wouldn't accept lowball offers, they would be removed from their own creation. The Weinsteins had learned from Fox's mistakes with In Living Color. Instead of publicly fighting with the creators, they would simply steal the intellectual property and continue without them. They hired David Zucker to direct Scary Movie 3, using the exact same pitch the Wayans had presented in their final meeting.
You can't do Wayans without the Wayans.
Yeah.
You can try, but eventually you're going to lose a lot of money. Because what we do is special. We have 200 years of comedy between me, Sean, and Keenan. Damon, Kim, we have a lot of years of excellence of what we do. You can't just put anybody on to...
The numbers proved Marlon's point. Scary Movie 3 made $220 million worldwide. Successful, but significantly less than the first two films. Scary Movie 4 dropped to $178 million. Scary Movie 5, made without any Wayans involvement, bombed with just $78 million worldwide. Each sequel performed worse than the last, proving that the franchise's value was tied directly to the family's creative input. But the Weinsteins had already achieved their real goal, establishing legal ownership of the Scary Movie brand. They could continue making inferior sequels indefinitely, preventing the Wayans from creating competing films in the same subgenre they had invented. The theft was perfectly legal. The Wayans had sold their idea to Miramax, and the contract gave the studio rights to continue the franchise with or without them. It was the same trap that had ensnared countless black creators throughout Hollywood history. Initial success followed by systematic exclusion from the profits they generated. Marlon found out about his replacement while on Christmas vacation, reading about it in the entertainment press. There had been no phone call, no final negotiation, no professional courtesy. The Weinsteins had simply moved forward with new talent, treating the Wayans like interchangeable parts in a machine they now owned. The psychological impact was devastating. The family had created something revolutionary, proved its massive commercial value, and watched it be stolen through legal machinations they couldn't fight. They were living proof that no amount of talent, success, or cultural impact could protect black creators from systematic exploitation. But the Wayans refused to be broken. They channeled their anger into new projects. White Chicks, Little Man, and Dance Flick proved they could create hits without studio backing. Each success was a middle finger to the system that had tried to destroy them. Years later, when Harvey Weinstein's criminal behavior was exposed and he was sentenced to prison, Marlon felt a sense of cosmic justice. God's revenge, he called it. The man who had stolen their franchise was now stripped of everything: his company, his freedom, his legacy. The Weinstein scandal revealed the true nature of Hollywood's power structure: systematic abuse disguised as business as usual. The same executives who stole from the Wayans were also committing far worse crimes against women throughout the industry. The corruption was total and interconnected. While Fox was busy stripping In Living Color's syndication value and the Wayans family was planning their exodus, the network deployed an even more insidious strategy: cultural colonization. They began flooding the show with white consultants whose job wasn't to improve the comedy, but to slowly drain it of its black identity. The consultants appeared gradually, introduced as network liaisons and comedy experts who would help the show reach broader audiences. Their real purpose was to make the Wayans feel like strangers in their own creation. Every sketch was questioned, every cultural reference was challenged, every piece of black humor was filtered through white sensibilities. The consultants had no understanding of black culture, but they didn't need to. Their job wasn't to understand, it was to control. They represented Fox's insurance policy. If the Wayans wouldn't play by traditional rules, their show would be slowly transformed into something the network could manage without them.
We used to make his life miserable because the advantage that we had was the slang. So we knew there were things that we could say that he had no idea what they meant.
The Wayans fought back through linguistic warfare. They used street slang, Caribbean patois, and urban dialects that the consultants couldn't understand. While white executives thought they were hearing gibberish, black audiences understood every word. It was code switching as resistance, cultural preservation disguised as comedy. But the consultants were learning. They hired translators, cultural advisors, and focus groups to decode what the Wayans were really saying. The comedy that had once been a private conversation between the creators and their community was being systematically decoded and sanitized.
But we had this sketch, and he said we couldn't say this particular thing. I don't remember what it was. But we said to him, okay, well, can I say toss my salad? Now, slang, toss my salad, literally is lick my.
The toss my salad incident became legendary among the writing staff. The censor, thinking it was an innocent phrase about food preparation, approved it for broadcast. Thousands of viewers heard explicit sexual slang on national television because the white executive was too culturally ignorant to understand what he was approving. The next day, after angry calls from conservative groups and laughing calls from hip viewers, the censor realized he had been played. But rather than admit his ignorance, he became even more restrictive and paranoid. Every word was now suspect. Every phrase was potentially coded rebellion. This dynamic revealed the fundamental problem with white oversight of black creativity. The censors were simultaneously too ignorant to understand what they were censoring and too paranoid to allow genuine cultural expression. They created an environment where authentic black humor was impossible, but crude stereotypes were encouraged. The writing room became a battlefield. White consultants pushed for sketches that played into racist stereotypes, the kind of safe black comedy that made white audiences comfortable. Meanwhile, the Wayans fought to maintain sketches that reflected genuine black experiences and perspectives. Characters like Homie the Clown, angry, uncompromising, refusing to perform for white comfort, became impossible to create under the new regime. The consultants wanted cheerful, non-threatening black characters who would entertain without challenging. They wanted the Cosby Show energy in a sketch comedy format. The Wayans realized they were watching their creation be transformed into exactly the kind of show they had rebelled against. In Living Color was being slowly bleached of its blackness, turned into a mainstream variety show that happened to feature black performers rather than a genuine expression of black culture and humor. This cultural colonization was perhaps more devastating than the financial theft. Fox wasn't just stealing their money. They were stealing their voice, their identity, their right to speak to their own community in their own language. The show that had revolutionized black representation on television was being systematically destroyed from within. The battle between the Wayans family and Fox's standards department became a weekly war of psychological manipulation, cultural ignorance, and systematic racism disguised as broadcast regulation. What looked like routine content review was actually a sophisticated method of controlling black creative expression.
I said to him, I said, okay, let's do this. Instead of telling me what I can't say, tell me what I can say. Give me, like you can't say this, but if you say that or something like that, and we started to work with each other. And then it became much easier for both of us.
Keenan's eventual collaboration with the censor represented something unprecedented, a black creative force negotiating with white institutional power from a position of strength. But this dynamic made network executives deeply uncomfortable. If the Wayans could dictate terms to standards and practices, what other demands might they make? The censorship wasn't really about protecting audiences. It was about maintaining cultural control. Saturday Night Live had been pushing boundaries with white comedians for decades without facing the same level of scrutiny. The difference wasn't about content standards. It was about who was allowed to control the cultural conversation.
The person who aired it got the wrong cut. And so he aired the thing in its entirety. And again, the poor guy almost lost his job. And it wasn't our fault. It was, the guy just aired the wrong one. I don't know why. But it never aired again.
The Colt 45 sketch incident revealed how arbitrary and capricious the censorship process really was. A sketch was banned, then accidentally aired in its uncensored form, causing massive controversy. The fact that it had been filmed and produced proved the content wasn't inherently unbroadcastable. It was only unacceptable when certain people were watching. The wrong cut being aired exposed the entire charade. There were multiple versions of sketches being created to satisfy different levels of network paranoia. The Wayans were being forced to self-censor, creating sanitized versions of their own humor to appease executives who would never understand their cultural perspective.
and Damon improvises this joke about Carl Lewis being gay, because the whole premise of Men on Film is they out people. That's what they do, even people who aren't out.
The Carl Lewis controversy became the perfect weapon for Fox to use against the Wayans. Here was a clear case of inappropriate content that violated broadcast standards. Except the censor had the power to stop it, and chose not to. The 30-second delay system was specifically designed to prevent exactly this kind of incident. The selective enforcement was obvious to anyone paying attention. White comedians had been making similar jokes about public figures for decades without career-ending consequences. Johnny Carson, David Letterman, and countless others had built careers on mocking celebrities' personal lives. But when a black comedian crossed the same line, it became a federal case. The Carl Lewis incident gave Fox everything they needed: a sympathetic victim, clear evidence of inappropriate content, and public justification for any future restrictions they wanted to impose. The fact that their own censor could have prevented the controversy became irrelevant to the narrative. The censorship battles weren't really about individual sketches or specific jokes. They were about establishing who had the power to determine what was acceptable in American culture. The Wayans represented the terrifying possibility that black creators might control their own narrative without white approval or oversight. Every time the Wayans won a censorship battle, they proved that black creativity didn't need white validation to succeed. Every time they bypassed the censors through linguistic innovation or cultural coding, they demonstrated the irrelevance of white cultural gatekeepers. This independence was far more threatening than any individual sketch could ever be. The censorship games revealed the fundamental contradiction at the heart of the entertainment industry. They wanted black talent to generate profit, but not black perspectives to shape culture. They wanted the Wayans' creativity, but not their autonomy, their humor, but not their voice, their success, but not their power. After the Wayans family walked away from In Living Color and later had Scary Movie stolen from them, Hollywood deployed its most powerful weapon, the informal Blacklist. Meanwhile, white creators with far less success were being handed massive development deals and studio backing. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Mediocre white content received unlimited support, while revolutionary black creativity was systematically excluded. The Wayans adapted by building their own independent operation. They financed their own projects, distributed through smaller companies, and maintained creative control by staying outside the major studio system. White Chicks, Little Man, and other films proved they could succeed without Hollywood's permission. But independence came at a cost. Their budgets were smaller, their marketing limited, their distribution networks restricted. They were competing against studios with unlimited resources while operating on bootstrap financing. The fact that they succeeded at all was a testament to their talent and determination. The Blacklist extended beyond just the original family members. Damon Wayans Jr. found himself struggling to get roles despite obvious talent. Other family members faced similar obstacles. Hollywood's message was clear: cross the system and your entire bloodline will pay the price. The streaming revolution offered new hope, but even Netflix and other platforms reflected the same biases. While white comedians received massive development deals, the Wayans found themselves marginalized despite their proven track record of success. The systematic exclusion wasn't just about individual careers, it was about preventing other black creators from following the Wayans' example. By destroying the family that had achieved the most independence, Hollywood sent a message to every other black entertainer. This is what happens when you demand equality. The Wayans' story became a cautionary tale whispered throughout the industry. Don't be too successful. Don't demand too much control. Don't forget your place. The family that had revolutionized comedy and generated hundreds of millions in revenue was treated as a warning rather than an inspiration. Today, the entertainment industry loves to celebrate diversity and inclusion. But the Wayans family's treatment reveals the limits of that commitment. True equality means sharing power, not just sharing profits. It means allowing Black creators to control their own narratives, not just perform in white-approved stories. The Wayans were canceled, not because they failed, but because they succeeded too well. They proved that Black excellence didn't need white approval, and that was the most dangerous message of all. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Bye.